Welcome to miniatures.de, your military miniatures magazine. In this issue, we're going to paint Airfix 1:76 scale German Fallschirmjäger Paratroops. We are going to paint them in the early pattern Fallschirmjägerbluse M40 Jump Smock because that's how Airfix sculpted them. This uniform was worn as early as 1940 and it remained in use in 1944 in Normandy, making these Fallschirmjäger more versatile than later versions of the same troop type. The color of the jump smock was Grünmeliert, green melange, or mixed green, and we covered how to make this color in an earlier video which will be linked in the description. So these are the miniatures we airbrushed at the end of that other video. We airbrushed the artist acrylic paint directly onto the plastic without the need for a primer or undercoat. In fact, this is the uniform color and it's the undercoat of the entire miniature at the same time. The wet palette you see here has been in use for 2 or 3 ongoing projects, and there's still enough paint in it, so we will continue using it for this project. We started by mixing a flesh color using yellow ochre, titanium white, and vermilion red. And we're now applying this flesh color with a relatively large number 2 paintbrush. At this point in the painting process, we're not worried about getting flesh-colored paint onto the rifle or the helmet. All we need to make sure is that the jump smock stays green. That done, we are now going to give the faces and hands a wash of burnt sienna. This is a semi-transparent artist acrylic paint, which we are going to dilute heavily with water, and then we're going to add ox gall as a flow improver. When we touch the flesh-colored areas with our loaded brush, the glaze is pulled into the recesses, shading the areas between the fingers, the eye sockets, the inner ear, etc. This is all the shading we need to do for a wargaming or a diorama paint job. If more detail is required, the third and final step can be to use the original flesh color and highlight the nose, the chin, the cheekbones, and the outer rim of the ear. For the next step in our painting process, we cleaned up the wet palette because we now need room for some serious mixing of colors. What you see here is a limited palette of only 3 primary colors: blue, red and yellow, plus burnt umber, white and black. Once those colors were placed on the palette, we used the primary colors blue, red and yellow to create the secondary colors violet, orange and green, which can be seen here too. We are now going to mix a muted blue for the dark blue Luftwaffe trousers, which some of these paratroopers actually wore into combat. We start by mixing a relatively dark gray, to which we will add more and more blue to arrive at the proper shade of blue that we're looking for. It's important to start every mixing process with the lightest of the colors involved, because it's easier to darken a mixture than it is to lighten one that got too dark. So we're carefully adding small amounts of blue to see where that takes us. Repeatedly checking the mixture against the miniature or a painting guide that we might have helps us focus and not overshoot our target. Clearly we're not there yet. We need to add more blue and possibly even black to get to a dark Luftwaffe blue color. The color is still not blue enough, so we will add more blue and try again. Okay, perfect. We're now going to use this color to paint the trousers on some of the soldiers and any other dark Luftwaffe blue items like the submachine gun pouches, the bandoliers, water bottle covers, and so forth. Luftwaffe Brotbeutel M31 Bread Bag and the water bottle covers are painted in the same blue color. The bread bag is an item we added to these miniatures using green stuff. This was the subject of a previous video about updating the Airfix Paratroopers. Many of the submachine gun pouches are also made of green stuff, as are the Cartridge Bandoliers worn by rifle-armed Fallschirmjäger. cartridge bandoliers were connected by a strap worn across the neck. We didn't sculpt the strap, but we're now going to paint it in. Most of these Fallschirmjäger miniatures are going to wear field grey trousers. So here we are, matching the green melange of the jump smock to the most attractive field grey we can find. Vallejo field grey and Tamiya field grey are the most likely contenders in our paint collection. Vallejo field grey is the more attractive of the two, so this will be the basis for our next mixture. We begin by mixing another dark grey, to which we will add small amounts of green until we arrive at the most accurate field grey color. Once we have a good enough match, we try this mixture on the miniature to see if it really works there too. It turns out that the mixture isn't green enough yet, so we add the remainder of our green paint and see where that takes us. That's much better, so now we can paint all the remaining trousers in this field grey color. We might even go ahead and paint one or two of the bread bags in field grey, assuming that some of the paratroopers received army equipment when the Luftwaffe experienced shortages. Our next color is RAL 7016 Flieger Blaugrau, literally Flyer Blue-Gray, which was later redesignated Anthracite Gray and used as a vehicle color by other branches of the German Army. We mixed Flieger Blau-Grau simply by adding black to our existing Luftwaffe blue-gray uniform color. RAL 7016 Flieger Blau-Grau was the base color for Luftwaffe ground vehicles and equipment. These Airfix Fallschirmjäger are carrying 3 items of painted Luftwaffe equipment: the M38 steel helmet, the drinking cup of the water bottle, and the Tornister Funkgerät Manpack radio. Our next color is a medium reddish brown, very similar to Vallejo mud brown. We can mix this color by darkening orange with the opposite color on the color wheel, which is blue. If this mixture is too dark, we can make it lighter by adding yellow. If this turned out too light and not reddish enough, throw in some violet. That's a good enough match, so now we will paint any Luftwaffe leather equipment in this color. Adding burnt umber to our leather brown will give us a darker brown color which we can use for the carbine. We also paint the wooden handle of the bayonet in this brown color. Now we mix another dark gray to paint the paratrooper's boots. To account for aerial perspective, we paint any black uniform items a very dark gray. Pure black is only ever used for darkening the colors we mix. Once the boots are done, we use the same dark gray color to paint the entrenching tool, the entrenching tool carrier, the scabbard, and the pommel of the bayonet. That done, we also paint the submachine guns and any metal parts on the carbine in dark gray. Using yellow, burnt umber, and titanium white, we mix a dirty beige color to paint the entrenching tool handle with. Airfix had these paratroopers sculpted without the Y-strap braces which held up the waist belt. The mistake is easy to fix by painting in the Y-straps. Since these are Luftwaffe Y-straps, we underpaint them dark grey and then overpaint them in the same leather brown we mixed earlier. When we overpaint these Y-straps, we make sure to leave a hairline of dark grey just along the edges to give the Y-straps more depth. Some of these paratroopers are given rank insignia consisting of a Luftwaffe blue rectangle on which the white insignia is then painted. This miniature is promoted to Feldwebel, a senior non-commissioned officer who may act as a platoon leader. Once everything is painted, we protect the miniatures with a coat of gloss acrylic varnish. The gloss varnish needs to dry overnight, and then we're ready to give these miniatures a wash. The wash is made up of burnt umber acrylic paint, highly diluted with water and with some flow improver added. When we apply the wash, we only work on a few miniatures at a time. We want to make sure that the wash is evenly distributed and shades the deepest folds in the clothing and the equipment. This final umber wash brings all of the colors nicely together, making the miniatures appear less painted, less toy-like, and more realistic. If puddles form, we remove the excess wash with a clean brush. The wash is left to dry overnight, and then the miniatures are protected with matte acrylic varnish. Using yellow ochre and titanium white, we mix a light beige color for dry brushing the miniatures. Careful and very subtle dry brushing will accentuate the finest details on these miniatures, adding depth and making them appear more lively. We want this final dry brush to be as subtle as possible and not to overpower the miniature. One way to ensure this is to begin dry brushing the base of the miniature. While we're doing that, there will come a time when the brush is just perfectly loaded, and that's the moment we start dry brushing the actual miniature itself. We just want to highlight some of the raised edges and not dust the entire miniature, so it's important to stop before the effect becomes too noticeable. Right, and this is how amazing antique Airfix miniatures can be if we give them a little attention and creativity. Thank you for watching. For more information, please visit our website at miniatures.de.